Former Kansas City Police Department intelligence detective and now attorney Gary Jenkins produced 4 documentary films, most recently Gangland Wire, creator of smartphone app entitled Kansas City Mob Tours. Download it now. If you like what you hear, go to ganglandwire.com. Navigate to the shop page. We need you to put a hit out on our donate button. Gangland Wire True Crime Stories is produced at the Big Dumb Fun Show Studio 4. And now, here's Gary Jenkins.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be back here in the Big Dumb Fun Show Studio 4 in the beautiful classic old ice house building in Midtown, Kansas City. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Aaron. Say hello, Aaron.
Hello, Aaron.
I always say good evening. You might notice that because we always record in the evening. Now, you may not be listening to this in the evening. You may be listening to this in the morning on your way to work, or you may be listening to it while you are at work. I don't know. But we have a story tonight. It is going to explain a little more. It's art imitating life. And there was a movie. You may be familiar with it. I bet any true crime fan is familiar with this movie. It's called L.A. Confidential. The screenplay and the book were originally written by a man named James Ellroy, who lived here in Kansas City for a while. He was from California. His mother was killed in some kind of a bizarre kind of a killing out there. And during that time growing up, and he got to know a lot of L.A. policemen because they were investigating his mother's murder. And he's been fascinated by Los Angeles Police Department. And L.A. Confidential kind of tells a story of a small group of LAPD officers in the early 50s and some of the things they got into. They and like Mulholland Drive, if you've seen that, that's about some L.A. policemen. And it's a well-known fact by now that the L.A. Police Department in the early 1950s was not all squeaky clean like most other big city police departments, including Kansas City. They also, they had some mob guys. They had Mickey Cohen was living out there. Bugsy Siegel was living out there, I believe, and when they built the casino in the Flamingo in Las Vegas. But these guys, when mobsters, Los Angeles was kind of a subset of Chicago and Cleveland, the Midwest mobs. The New York mobs didn't really, they sent some people out there, but the Midwest mobs kind of felt like they controlled things out on the West Coast because they were closer. And they had sent people out there, and we're going to talk about 2 people that got killed that were from Kansas City that were out there, and they also were killed in this movie. Now, if you remember in this movie, there was Russell Crowe portrayed a guy who was kind of obsessed with spousal abusers. He beat the crap out of one of the guys early in the movie, and that's when the kind of evil lieutenant of this small squad recruited him in because they wanted to do some strong arm work. And I started to say about Mulholland Falls, and there's been some other depictions of this. The LAPD, kind of a special squad, maybe it was their kind of like their intelligence unit. And when mobsters would come to town, they would take them up on Mulholland Drive and at the Mulholland Falls and throw them off. And maybe they lived and maybe they didn't, and they told them not to come back to town. They did that to plenty of people, but I think probably some money went out as the mob guys came out and they started establishing businesses out there and establishing rackets and people being people while they bought their way in. And so we had Russell Crowe, and he was working with a guy named Jack Vincennes, who was played by Kevin Spacey, who was like a technical advisor on a movie at the time. I think all those LAPD guys probably tried to get into movies at some point in time.
He was an actual officer, though. But
he was an arts officer in this special
Jack
squad.
Vincennes.
Jack Vincennes. He was an actual officer, or he wasn't actual. He was playing an officer in this special squad that was. They investigated only the big time crimes, and it's like the robbery homicide unit of the early days. And
he was kind of the guy that was the gray area guy.
He was the gray area guy. He definitely was a gray area guy.
Because he was taking a pinch from Danny DeVito to
Yeah, he was slipping money to, or Dan DeVito was slipping money to him to get inside scoops for his Hush Hush magazine. Matter of fact, we've got just a little clip that's going to lead into this this story from Danny DeVito. And the other guy was his name in the movie was Edmund Exley. He was played by an Australian, just like Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe's an Australian. This guy's name was Guy Pearce, and he was an Australian. He played the straight arrow policeman who, in the end, proved to be a little bit corrupt, and it showed that everybody has a little tinge of corruption to them in the end, if you remember the movie. We won't go through the whole movie. What we're really only interested in is...
Well, he was a smart politician.
He was a very smart politician. Yes, he was. He was on his way up. He wanted to be the chief of police someday, and that's the kind of guy that becomes the chief of police. The guy that can walk that line and not go over too far and not be construed as too political and too ambitious, but yet he really is, and he does move on up. And I've seen many guys like that. You know, they had one interesting little thing on a Christmas Eve. They go into the jail, called it Bloody Christmas, and they go into the jail and they just beat the crap out of some of these crooks in there. I tell you what, being a policeman back in the 50s was there was a fine line between the cops and the crooks. Everything I've ever been able to learn. You know, the guy that kind of taught me everything I knew in the intelligence unit was an old-time detective hired on in Kansas City. He was a World War II vet and came on in like 1950 or 51, and he told me the first guy he rode with, they put him with the guy who was riding a night car, beat car, on West 12th Street, which was where all the strip bars and the honky-tonks were, and all night long, this was like pickup night. This guy would swing by and get money from these bars, and they gave him money in order for protection and to leave him alone if they had any kind of problems. Why this guy would swing in there and handle them, or maybe throw somebody out for them, or if they wanted a money run, go to the bank afterwards. He'd take the barmaid on a money run to the bank and do a night drop, and always take the bartender's side if there's any kind of dispute. And he said at the end of the shift, Ray told me, he said the guy pulled up, and he counted out the money. He counted half on one side of the seat and half on the other side of the seat. Ray said, I looked at him and said, no, I don't want any of that. The guy said he just looked at him, picked all the money up, scooped it up, and walked off. And from then on, this new recruit was assigned alone. He did not ride with anybody else.
He didn't want to really know what was going on.
He didn't want to know what was going on, and nobody would trust him after that for a long time. He ended up being, him and his partner, his name was Ray Kinney, and his partner, Jimmy Doolin, was another good old country boy who wouldn't take money back in the 50s, and they were the first two officers that were picked to start the law enforcement intelligence unit.
I was going to say, they said, send him to the intelligence unit.
Intelligence unit. You got to be squeaky clean to work in the intelligence unit and work for the chief. Anyhow, I digress. Let's get back to
L.A. Confidential.
L.A. Confidential
is based on a true story.
Yeah, kind of.
You think it's just hyperbole, or does it relate back to the two Tonys?
Well, that happened. I mean, it wasn't based all around the two Tonys. That was just part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The whole story was much more to that. Part of it was how they were taking these criminals out to that hotel, that old motel, and beating the crap out of them and torturing them. They were stealing money. They were killing. The story was the cops were killing off these mobsters and taking their dope and taking their money was kind of the underlying.
Yeah, there was a large supply of heroin that went up missing.
Right, and so that was kind of the story. But it wasn't. It was kind of semi-based on real things, but not totally. The whole LAPD or some big unit wasn't really involved.
Yeah, I think
that. But the two Tonys were out there.
The line they used was there was a two-man team punching people's tickets.
Yeah, they punched some tickets, all right. Punched some tickets. They'd take those La Cosa Nostra mobsters and throw them off of Mulholland Drive and off the falls if they didn't agree to go back to Chicago or Cleveland or wherever they came from. So the two Tonys came out from Kansas City. That's what caught my eye on this. I was noodling around looking for stories and interesting stories on the internet, and I kind of knew about this, but I'd forgotten about it. They were kind of minor mob guys in Kansas City. Their real names were Anthony Brancato and Anthony Joseph Trombino. Now, come on to modern days, like the Brancato family, I don't know if he's any relative, but probably is some kind of a shirt-tail relative, owned Fairyland Park here in Kansas City. And they had today, I think they still have a Brancato catering. Now, they're not really involved. There was a Brancato, was it Nick Brancato? He got involved. And if you go back to my story about Jimmy Duarte in Oklahoma, going down and trying to take over a whole county down around Grand Lake in Oklahoma, which is the northeast part of Oklahoma, and organized several joints for prostitution and gambling interest and
running Vice.
And they had bought off the prosecutor and probably the sheriff down there.
Wait, and
the prosecutor for sure, because he went to jail.
And one of those folks was a Brancato?
One of them was Nate Brancato, yeah, which was part of the Fairyland Brancatos. I probably shouldn't say that, but.
No, Anthony Joseph Trombino.
Yeah, and there's some Trombinos today. We had a guy named Jack Trombino. We used to follow around a little bit. He was a liquor salesman. He was kind of a periphery character. He wasn't really a mob guy. So I don't know if they're family or not, but these guys are from Kansas City, and they really were just muscle for hire who had been arrested many times in Kansas City. And like, ambitious young men in the 50s, they might want to go to California to be where the streets are paved with gold out there in Hollywood and sleep with those Hollywood stars and make a lot of money and really take their act to some place where the police didn't know them. That also is a reason to go out there. And by this point in time, there was.
Well, how can they just go out there and go, yeah, we're associates from Kansas City? They have to kind of know somebody?
Well, sure. The Chicago outfit had already kind of put the boss in place out there, a guy named Jack Dragna, who was the boss. And these guys show up, and they probably had somebody had gotten hold of somebody and said, hey, these two dudes are coming out. They're tough guys, and maybe you can use them. They're looking for work. And
if you ever need some muscle.
You ever need some muscle. They got out there, and they became part of Mickey Cohen's crew. Mickey Cohen was a gambler and had been connected with the East Coast Mafia for a long time, and he'd moved out to Los Angeles and had a book going out there, a sports book. He's a moneymaker for the mob. And so he took these two guys in to muscle people. Somebody owed him money, or he thought one of his bookies was cheating on him. Why he could send Trombino and Brancato, the two Tonys, out and muscle them. Now, Mickey Cohen, what's interesting about Mickey Cohen, this is a mob book that most people never heard of. He co-wrote with another author. Is like he was part of it. It wasn't just some mob expert gathering up public documents and writing stuff. This is Mickey Cohen, my own words, in which he described this Brancato. He said, then he started stepping out on his own. He was on the heavy and on the heist, and he was heisting people that were contrary to the rules of the people he was supposed to have respected. Not only me, but others. Talking about the two Tonys, they were wild-haired young bloods that thought they were just going to run roughshod over everybody. Well, I couldn't pay them much attention then because of my troubles. They thought they didn't have to show any respect for nobody. So, he was probably complaining to the mob boss, Jack Dragna, out there, that these guys were out of control. They were robbing people they weren't supposed to rob, and they weren't showing respect.
Well, if they were robbing people, they were supposed to at least give a street tax and, wet their beak.
Yeah, and you don't rob somebody that's already paying to somebody else.
Yeah.
And they were doing that, too. And Cohen he had his own problems, and he didn't really have time. He claims that he tried to counsel Tony Brancato, but the guy wouldn't listen to him. In 1951, the early summer of 1951, Mickey Cohen was in penitentiary. He's at Alcatraz, I believe, had a federal charge for, probably income tax. I can't remember now. The two Tonys had, by this time, had a combined record of, I got this written down here, 46 arrests and 17 convictions. Their crimes included aggravated assault, armed robbery, burglary, narcotics violations, rape of all things. You never hear mob guys getting charged with rape. And they were also suspected of several murders. Now, some of those murders might have been for Mickey Cohen or for Jack Dragna, the mob boss out there. But these guys, they just didn't care. They were running wild. Then they did the unthinkable at the time. In June of 1951, along with three other masked gunmen, robbed the Flamingo Hotel's cash room, or the Flamingo Casino's cash room, with $3,500. Now, the Flamingo was a mob hotel and a mob casino. and this guy named Hy Gobom